Welcome to the Recovery.com podcast. I'm Dr. Mala, editor-in-chief at Recovery.com. And today I'm joined by my fellow host, Cliff McDonald, Chief Growth Officer at Recovery.com. Hi, Cliff.
Hi, Dr. Mala. It's great to be here with you.
Thank you. Today I'm so excited to welcome Jeff Hatch, an Ivy League graduate, retired NFL player, and man in long-term recovery who has overcome significant challenges. That inspiring journey has been featured in documentaries and recognized with a President's Award for Community Service. And now it has led him to serve as the National Clinical Outreach Coordinator for Summit Behavioral Healthcare, dedicating his days to helping others find their own path to recovery. Welcome, Jeff. It's such an honor to have you here with us.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's an honor to be here with you. So thank you, Dr. Mala. Thank you, Cliff. Glad to be here with you guys.
Thank you. So, can you start off by sharing your journey into recovery and what inspired you to take those first steps?
My first thought when you say that is that it wasn't steps that I was inspired to take. It was that steps that other people told me I should likely take. And that was what kind of started the journey for me. You know, I had played in the NFL. I think substance use disorder and I think like alcoholism, as I define it, was a part of me from the time I was born.
Mm-hmm.
I never felt like I fit in. I never felt like I belonged. It's funny, my wife and I were talking about it last night. I was sharing a memory with her that I'll share with you guys, but kind of the crux of the conversation was, what is that thing in us that have substance use disorder that makes us feel so alone and apart from? We don't know necessarily, but we know it's definitely like a unifying theme among people who have it. And I experienced that. So I did everything I could to try to fill that void inside myself with drugs and alcohol, and then also with my attempts at material success or kind of like third dimensional accolades that I assumed at some point would make me feel okay inside.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't. Shocker. And, you know, I think that was really kind of the first start. That was really my rookie year in the NFL where that little seed was planted that,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you have all the stuff now and you still feel the same way. There must be something else to this. But it really wasn't until 4 years later when I'd had multiple back injuries, had a career-ending injury, and had overdosed multiple times that getting actual help became what was required.
Mm-hmm. How did your time, and you kind of started going into it, but how did your time in the NFL influence your approach to dealing with addiction and recovery?
It's a really interesting experience. The memory I shared with my wife last night, I don't know why I thought of it, but I thought about when I grew up in a town called Serona Park, Maryland. And in that town, there was a barber shop in town. And when I started going to that barber shop with my dad to get my hair cut, it was a big deal. I mean, that was an event. And there were pictures on the wall in that barber shop of famous people who had gotten their hair cut there.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember as a kid hoping maybe one day that I would do something cool enough that I would get to have my picture on the wall at the Serona Park barber shop. And we'll fast forward now to after my rookie season in the NFL. Now, by this point, I am absolutely in the throes of my opiate addiction.
Mm-hmm.
I was probably taking 75 to 100 Vicodin a day, which has got a lot of Tylenol in it, really bad for your liver. But I remember I went back to Maryland because the barber shop, my picture was now on the wall, and they were having an autograph signing event. I was going to go sign autographs for all the hometown people. And I just remember feeling so sad because I was there's this dichotomy that exists for me, at least when I'm in active addiction, where like there's the person that people believe I am, there's the person I know that I am, and they are in direct conflict, right?
Yeah.
And so it was a really profound moment of experiencing that conflict of, wow, here these people are wanting to take pictures with me and telling me how great I am, and what I know is that like I'm a drug addict and I'm in real trouble. And it's a very isolating, lonely space.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an extreme experience, right? So I think you ask how playing in the NFL kind of played into my journey into recovery. I think that there's many layers to that, but one of the biggest ones for me is the idea that a lot of the experiences I had were not kind of run of the mill, so to speak, if there's such a thing as that. But, it is a unique experience to run out on a field with 90,000 people screaming for you when you get announced as the starting left tackle for the New York Giants. That's a unique experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so I noticed when I went to treatment, very quickly, I realized that like that piece of me I needed to get away from that.
Mm.
I was no longer that guy. And if I wanted to be anything beyond it, I had to really separate from that because it's very easy to get trapped in the ego complex of, oh, you played in the NFL. Oh, how cool is that? Oh, who did you play against? Oh, and I could tell stories for days about that, and we could, it'd be so fun. But what are we really doing there? We're not. That's not doing anything,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not helping and being useful in any way when I'm like that. So I knew I needed to separate from it. It was definitely difficult though on the front end, having been some type of minor pseudo celebrity as a professional athlete.
Yeah, Jeff, first of all, thanks so much for taking the time to be here with us. I have a lot of thoughts. I had some experiences that I think give me a little bit of an ability to understand where a football player, Ivy League, and this jumps out almost all the time on this podcast. Are you familiar with the arrival fallacy? Right? It's this kind of cognitive bias, psychological thing that is so common. We're not well, and we're not well because we don't have something yet. We're so goal oriented. Once I get my PhD, once I become the VP of sales, once I get X amount of followers, once I make the
Mm-hmm.
NFL, of course I will be fixed. Do you remember all of your achievements, man? Like getting there and still feeling like, okay, maybe for a day, it's like, oh, wow, this is awesome. I got drafted. But then, do you know what I'm saying? Did you keep coming back to like, I'm not fixed, man? Right?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
What's the next thing that I can do that is then going to bring me to this place of actualization, which really only like, well, I'm sure we'll dive deeper into, but you and I, but we all know, right? That only comes from interior work,
Mm-hmm.
Right,
right?
right.
Like there's no, there will never be an external thing. And what a wonderful culture we live in terms of consumerism that every day we're bombarded with messaging that says, get this thing and you'll feel great.
Yeah.
And it's just not real.
Yeah.
No, hence the correlation with the tremendous mental health challenges we have in the incident, right? And this is an experiment, right? The United States, the West, the culture. If you look at Eastern cultures that are so much older, the way they see us is exactly
Mm-hmm.
that, spiritually vacuous and
Yeah.
materialistic. And I think when you get your ass kicked like you did and I did, you realize it's always been
Mm-hmm.
external. And society has set these standards for us of what achievement means. Do you remember, Jeff, in your recovery? Because I remember a distinct time when, from the outside, my life didn't look
Mm-hmm.
good. I'd gone to treatment twice, right? I had lost a job. I had financial challenges, had some strained relationships, which wasn't something that I had had historically. I've always been able to get along with people. But after the lights came on the second time at treatment, I was in a place that other people would have said, like, man, that dude's not doing well. But I had peace.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that feeling?
100%. I really hadn't thought about it until one of the incredible people who work at your organization asked me in the Q&A after I spoke last week about it. And it was a moment when I had been through treatment. I spent 104 days in this treatment center. I moved into a recovery home with 12 dudes,
Yeah, right. Yeah,
and I was
yeah.
working at this movie store making minimum wage. And I remember waking up in the morning and feeling completely content and okay. And I went, whoa, this is different. And that was really profound. I mean, that has always stayed with me. That was the moment where I went, there's really something to what this is doing because it's completely transforming my outlook. And that I needed that bad.
Would you attribute that, Jeff, that shift and that realization, that reawakening, rebirth, whatever it is, to the 12 steps? Was it a counselor? Was it learning how to treat yourself with compassion?
I think it's all, and let me be honest with you on the front end and say that I am a big proponent of the 12 steps, right? I think that for me, anyways, that has been the pathway to peace and serenity. I think all those factors played into it, though. I had an incredible counselor at that treatment center. When I would have this incredibly negative personal outlook on myself that I would share with other people, they said, "Hey, man, wait a minute. Take it easy on yourself. You've done X, Y, and Z, and you're like a really good human being. Like, don't forget about that." And I go, "Oh, wow. Okay." Because my internal dialogue is always just the worst. I think for me that the work of the 12 steps really to me is about clearing space between me and the immaterial, me and the spiritual, clearing the space, and then 10, 11, and 12, maintaining and growing that space as I continue on. And when I'm doing those things, all of that happens. I have more self compassion. I'm way more peaceful and serene. I'm
Mm-hmm.
able to be useful and helpful. All those things stem from that for me, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say this too. That was hard fought, right? A lot of times I think people give a shot to a 12-step program and they don't see immediate results and they go, that doesn't work for me. And I get it. But I would also say it's in the effort, it's in the action, it's in the effort put forth that the results come. And they're not going to come quick. It's a slow process. And I want instant gratification. So I will quickly separate from something if I'm not getting what I want quickly. But the work of the 12 steps is a lifelong process and it's not fast.
Jeff, you've got a tremendous work ethic, and anyone that achieves what you have achieved, academically, professionally, athletically, you'll put in the work. It requires a lot of work. It's a different kind of work, and I think a lot of people, I think specifically 4 and 9, really, really, really out of your comfort zone, that searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves, and then going and making those amends, that's really hard work. But I think, as you realized, and so many people have, that's where the happy, joyous, and free comes from, right?
Totally. And it's really profoundly designed in the sense that you mentioned that about 4 and 9. So part of being a man in long-term recovery is sponsoring other men, right? I just took a guy through his fourth and fifth, and now we're on 6 and 7. And to watch this burden, literally, you can almost see it be lifted as he's sharing this stuff with someone and realizing he's not being judged and made to feel less than for it. That's a reinforcer for me all the time of
Mm-hmm.
like how cool this is.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Mala, that would be so. Jeff, as you know, Dr. Mala is a clinical psychologist. And step 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. I grew up Catholic, right? In most religions, with the dogma, there's some sort of atonement, a penance, and you go sit there and you confess a confessional, right? Dr. Mala, you see that with non addiction people, non-alcoholics, right? Like, you lay on the couch and you're safe and you can
Yeah.
share these things that you've never shared
Oh, yeah.
before.
Mm.
So you probably see parallels between that with people that aren't struggling with substance use
Sure.
disorder. But do you see those breakthroughs
Of course,
too?
for sure. I mean, one thing, and I'm going to kind of weave back into what you were saying, Jeff, about negative narratives. Oftentimes, people don't know what those narratives are until they have the space, or the space is being held for them to be able to just let it all out. And then they hear it and they're like, wait a second, what? I was holding on to this. And so one of my terms is toxic perseveration. When you look at perseveration, that's just being in that constant loop. And it kind of already alludes, the term itself alludes to it not being good, that you're just focused and harping on something. But to me, toxic perseveration is, yeah, you're looping in it, but you're looping in it to your detriment, like times 10, right?
Mm,
And you might not even realize that's what you're doing, right? So that toxic perseveration that ends up happening is sometimes unrealized until that space is held for you, or you're taking the time to be able to even sort through root causes of things. I think that would be my question for you, and also for our audience to hear, what were some of the root causes? You mentioned injuries, of course, culture, I'm guessing the competition, competitiveness. Like, what was the journey like for you? What ended up bringing you down that path of all the hurdles that you had?
to me, that you're asking me to basically give you kind of like the root causes of my alcoholism, my spiritual malady, my restless, irritable, and discontent outlook upon life. I think there's a combination of genetics. I think environment is huge in that. And then I think experiences that we have along the way. And I think I had the trifecta of those things where I always say, like, my grandfather, my dad's dad was alcoholic and he put hands on my dad.
Mm.
My dad was alcoholic and did not put hands on me. And now, my wife and I are in the process of moving towards having children, and I'm in recovery.
Mm-hmm.
So that incrementally improving that kind of, you know,
Yeah.
genealogical structure going forward, right? I think that's important. I think environment too is big, right? And I grew up in a house that my parents were together since they were 15 years old, and they were wonderful people. They are wonderful. My dad is gone, but my mom is still with us, and she's a wonderful person. But I think our home was one where high achievement was expected.
Mm.
We did not share about things that were not positive. It was hard work and like no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It was military. And so I think that played into it too, right? And then I think my experiences, right? I remember, like I said, just feeling so separate from others. And also, really, truthfully, physically being different than everyone else, right? Like, I mean, I was like a foot taller than everyone forever, basically. And I mentioned it when I was there, I mean, I think I started shaving when I was like 11,
Mm.
like that was weird. And so I think all that together that combined to kind of set this brew in that when I was exposed to the solution of alcohol for the first time, boy, it soothed all those crevices that were there from that other stuff.
Mm.
I don't know what the differentiator is between me and someone who doesn't have what I have, but I know for me, once I felt that soothing, I knew that I was going to pursue it and keep getting it. There was never a moment of, oh, this will be nice to go to once in a while if I
Mm.
really need to break free, right? Or I need a glass of wine after a hard day at work, whatever that looks like for people. No, no, no. For me, anesthetizing my emotional wreckage was always the goal of substances.
Mm.
You felt like you never fit in, and I believe you 100%. Of course I do. It must have been hard for other people to even have a concept, though, that this guy who looks like very privileged class, big, strong, smart, white,
Perception. Yeah.
right? But yeah, exactly. Like, how could this guy not feel like he fit
Mm.
in? He's what so many of us want to be. Does that make any
Mm.
sense?
Totally, totally.
Right,
Which only exacerbates the experience for the person having it, right?
Yeah.
right,
Well, they're obviously right. What's wrong with me?
right.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and one of our core values here is vulnerability. It's something I'm still I'm 53 years old, and I learned in my alcoholism progressed later. I had a 34-year run, and 6 years ago it progressed, and it progressed quickly. That concept of being vulnerable was brand new to me when I was 47 years old. And I'm guessing you probably same thing. Like you didn't have a lot of space to say, I'm struggling, I'm
There it is.
scared, I
Yeah.
don't have
Yeah.
this. Is that
Yeah.
accurate?
Absolutely accurate. Absolutely. Yeah. Part of it being the culture that I was a part of, both athletically and at a high level academic institution, you're expected to achieve, right? And also, again, you couple that with, I'm big, I'm strong. I don't share the pieces of me that are not that. But I think, too, like partly relating to what you were talking about, Dr. Mahler, with that, I'm going to say the word, I'm going to try to say it right, toxic preservation,
Perseveration. Yeah. Yeah.
perseveration.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not that smart.
No.
But that kind of negative narrative play
Mm.
really becomes overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and look at the history too. It's like we have a family culture where there's expectations for and standards that you're trying to meet. Then you go hit the Ivy Leagues and then you're in sports in the NFL. I mean, all of those cultures arguably are going to put that demand down. But I would also argue that those of us who come from those backgrounds, are going to seek the same backgrounds as we move forward. And that can typically happen because we're trying to resolve, whether consciously or subconsciously, the issues of our past or the things that have
Hmm.
been difficult to kind of jump over in terms of the hurdles. So it doesn't surprise me that you were drawn to, even similar environments that demanded the same in maybe different ways or more ways, even because it was a language you knew, it was an environment that you knew. Turning points. What were your turning points or moments where you were like, okay, people are telling me I need to get help, so I'm going to do this? Did it work the first time? How did that journey look for you?
It looked like going kicking and screaming, agreeing to stay for 2 weeks to detox safely because I had had grand mal seizures, and they
Mm,
pretty well convinced me that if I didn't detox in a medical environment, I was in danger of more. Getting to that 2 week mark, and I'll never forget this, there was a guy who had become a friend of mine in the treatment center I was in, and he had been there a few weeks longer than me. So he had just gotten his 30-day chip.
mhm,
This is a guy who had committed vehicular manslaughter under the influence and was awaiting trial.
mm,
And he came to me, and I was like, I was dead set I was leaving at 2 weeks. And he came and he said, look, man, I don't really know what's happening, but something's starting to change in me, and you should, like, why not stick around and just see what comes?
mm,
And so then I'm at this place of, okay, I'm going to do this thing, and maybe then I'll get off alcohol and opiates and stuff, but I'm still going to smoke marijuana because I can do that. Then I get to that 30-day mark, and I'll never forget, it was the 42nd day I was in that treatment center that I was walking over to get morning meds. It was just a moment of, I always describe it as getting smacked in the forehead with a 2x4 that said powerless.
mm,
I think I was far enough away from drugs and alcohol in terms of clouding my mind space and my emotional landscape. I was seeing enough of the solution oriented stuff happening at this place
mhm,
that there was a moment where I went, wait a minute. Like, my best efforts, my best thinking got me here. Maybe I should go for this and, like, try a different way.
mm,
That was the only inkling of willingness that it took for me to start down the road of recovery, which then I jumped in full force, and it was great, and it held for a good while. But there's some pitfalls that I think happen around between years 5 and 10 in sobriety that I experienced. And to tie it together, I was not in a place where I felt my vulnerability was of value,
mm,
where sharing these things that I felt that weren't great or positive was an imperative piece of me actually staying spiritually fit, right?
mhm,
And so that kind of just coupled forward to what occurred in my relapse. And the second time around for me really was, I mean, I'll be honest with you guys, I would never wish that experience on a person that I dislike more than any other human being walking on the earth. When the DEA, the FBI leave your place and you realize you're now part of, like, an active federal investigation, you're going to end up getting charged with a federal felony, and your life is going to fall apart. But not today. Somewhere down the line, it's going to happen.
yeah,
That experience was the one that really forced me into the deeper work of the spiritual aspects of the 12 steps and how I stay well today. That was like, it was
mhm,
required. If I was going to keep living, I needed to find a way, and that was the only thing I could do. So those were two turning points, the first time around, and then the second time, I think, where I really went, oh, wow, we were here and now we have to be here. It's easier than we make it out to be in our minds. It's incredibly difficult and hard work to get done. But I just say to the audience, anybody listening, if you're in a place where you're unsatisfied with how things are going and what's going on, put a plan in place to change those things and take the action to change them,
yeah,
because you'll feel better regardless of the outcome. You'll be taking action towards what you want. And that to me is a great lesson learned through the kind of recovery journey for me.
that's awesome.
Jeff, I've got a deeply personal question here. If it's inappropriate, just say so. So, fair warning. We were talking
Love.
about being vulnerable. Actually, I'll share this first. So, when I went to treatment the second time, it was after a really bad relapse, and things were really, really bad for me and really dark. And they knew, right? The intake counselor knew he had my folder, right? And ridiculously high blood alcohol contents and just a life that was extremely unmanageable. And he said, and he looked me straight in the eye and he said, Cliff, why are you trying to kill yourself? And it hit me so hard. Like I had never been suicidal, ever. I never had suicidal ideation. But that was big for me because it made me kind of think that through. And I realized, Jeff, right then, like I didn't care that day if I died, but I also like didn't care if I lived. And I never thought of like, how am I going to plan this? Am I going to poison myself? I'm not a gun owner. Did you ever get that dark? Did you ever think like, what's the point? You know?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. And I mean, I'll be frank with you and say that I'm prone to not necessarily suicidal ideation, but pretty major depressive behavior. I was in seventh grade and I found poems that I wrote in seventh grade that were so macabre and dark.
Mm,
And I was 12, 13 years old. So, yes, I think the first time around, I wasn't actively thinking of ending my life, but it was that place you described right there, this kind of purgatory of I don't care really if I live, and I really don't care if I die. I mean, the existence is pointless, and I just need to be high all the time, and that's all that matters.
mm,
The second time around was way darker. When that happened, when my life changed as a result of my behaviors, and I started to actually recognize and realize there were going to be some serious consequences, that was when I went to the place of I got a box cutter that I put under the sink in the bathroom. I had like kind of like a little bit of a tub shower thing. So I was like, I'm just going to get in there, cut my wrists, and turn the water on. And I had written the notes. Yeah, I mean, it got there, which is sad, you know? I mean, but it's real. And I will say to you, as I even share that with you now, when I think about where my life is now, and where my valuation of myself internally is. I'm just so grateful that that never went to an action phase.
yeah.
Yeah, we are
So
too,
so
man.
am I, so are we.
Yeah,
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 absolutely.
yeah. You wrote the notes, right? You had found a vehicle with writing when you were younger, and you came back to that. Man, I just keep coming back to Jeff. You know, we're described often as people pleasers and empaths. I identify as a nonviolent person, right? And all that. It's so complex for people that end up playing very physical sports, or they're fighters, or they're military, or
Mhm.
whatever. Are you comfortable today identifying as someone that wants to make peace and serenity? And but is that new for you, right? Like being like, that's who I am, right?
It was new that
Isn't that a wonderful thing
uh,
that that is who you are?
absolutely, and it was new. It was new when I first started to experience it, but like I am full on now. Like I'm just walking the way of the peaceful warrior, man. Right? I will be honest with you guys and say part of the reason I try to stay, like I'm a large guy, right? You know, and I work out really hard to stay muscular and built. But it's almost for me kind of like I want that to be the visual representation of what actually is like gooey teddy bear love all up in here, right? I love owning that. I love being that guy. I love representing that for people because to me, I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned is this idea of not only compassion for myself, but just compassion for people in general. Just compassion for someone who I see in the grocery store that I don't know what their
Yeah.
story is. But if I can show them some sense of comfort, light, peace, positivity, well, then I think I'm living rightly directed. I think I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing when I'm doing that. And I just own that full force. I love it.
Yeah, dude, you that story you shared about the grocery store and the
Mhm.
guy who kept asking you like, "Hey, what team do you play for? This or that?" And then he tracked you
Mhm.
down. And he said, "I got 12 years." That like that I have a horrible memory. That's on my hard drive forever,
Yeah.
man. That was like I was like, "Oh man." That
Yeah,
that is a humanistic moment
Mhm.
where it was like this guy's chasing you, looking up to you, and then it's like he's further along with some other journey than you
Mhm.
are, right? That was
totally.
just beautiful, man.
Cool.
I love
Thanks.
that.
Thank you.
I love
Thanks for
that
saying that.
story. I want you to share that with us for a second, but I have to add also, like, I think we just need so much of that in general. We're living in a time right now where we need to ramp up the compassion and the nonviolent means of communicating with one another, and tensions are rising. And I'll give you an example too. I literally, we were doing all this travel and what have you, and bumping into people in the airport and what have you. And I kid you not, the amount of times that people would just bump and go and not say anything was ramping up. And it's very easy in those types of scenarios, right? To just focus on the negative, be grumpy, get even more angry. But every single time, it's like, sorry, just yelling it. And then one time it happened where an individual just brushed by me. And then, even though he was rushing and like way down the line, he said, I'm so sorry. And I could hear him, and I just turned back and I said, it's okay. And it was such a great moment because it didn't matter when, right? It didn't matter that you were far down the line or close down the line. He still made that effort. I still made that effort. And it was just a beautiful moment of like, wait, there still is compassion in this world. And we need so much of that. Jeff, you have that beautiful story. I want you to share that story for sure. But I also want to say that it's so important for us to just emulate this now more than ever. So I'm going to be quiet. I want you to share that story.
Cool. No, I will, and I just want to share on that too. Like what happened, I feel like in that moment is that you were seen
Yeah.
and he was seen, and that's really all it is. It sounds grandiose in the sense of being compassionate and altruistic in our motives and all that stuff. It's really a lot simpler, right?
hmm
Just make people feel seen.
Seen. Yeah.
Just care, just care.
Yeah.
But the story is we would go grocery shopping. We all have our like normal grocery stores we go to, and my wife and I, we were in Savannah, Georgia, so Publix is really big down there, and there was one probably 6 minutes from our house. And one funny thing too about my relationship with my wife is she's 5'1" and I'm 6'7", so inevitably the things that happen when I'm alone in the world, i.e., what sport do you play, blah blah blah, is even more so when we're together because of the dichotomy between our heights.
Yeah.
And so there was a particular guy who worked at the grocery store who was really peppering me about sports and
Mm.
whether I played sports or not. And I usually am really deflective about that stuff. Someone's not going to say, "Did you play football?" And I'm going to go, "Yeah, I played in the NFL." No, I'm going to be like, "No, I played squash." Or no, I'm like really good table tennis. I did it like
Yeah.
semi-pro, but never all the way. Things like that, just to kind of move along without. But he was really pressing. We were at the checkout, and he had me pinned, and he started asking me again. He said, "You must have played football." And I finally was like, "Yes, I did." And he's like, "Well, where did you play?" And I told him the high school I played for, Severn School. And he said, "Well, did you play in college?" And I said, "I did." "Where did you play?" "Well, I played for University of Pennsylvania, the Quakers. You've never heard of them." And he said, "Well, did you play after college?" And I kind of looked at my wife, and she was just like, "Just tell him. Who cares?" So I was like, "I did. I played for the Giants and the Buccaneers." And he asked me, he said, "What's your name?" The inevitability at that point for me was, look, if you Google me, the first 15 things that come up are about my federal drug trafficking charges. And I look like a rather nefarious character. And so I didn't care if he knew I played football. I didn't want him to look my name up because I knew we would have to go to a different grocery store now because he's going to go tell everybody who works there that that big, huge guy who comes in here is a heroin trafficker. And so we checked out and we left the store. And I immediately just kind of went to like, now we have to find a new grocery store. I know there's another Publix that's like 10 minutes in the other direction. We can go there, but I don't know what day they get bread in there. I don't know exactly where the oranges are freshest when they stack them there. I was upset. I was bothered, and it was an internal thing. I was bothered by the fact that I had behaved in such a way that as a result of someone Googling me, I would need to find a new grocery store.
Mm.
And the next day I woke up and there was an email in my work email address, and it was from that employee of the Publix. And he said to me, "Jeff, I want to let you know that like I've been sober for 12 years and I'm so happy you made it back into the rooms. Congratulations. And like can't wait to see you guys next week." And it just was like, whoa, what? And it was a lesson for me in the sense of stop telling myself stories
Mhm.
about, don't do that. Because I'm going to always tell myself a worse story than what it was or what it is, right? So yeah, that was a cool experience.
It gave me chills again, man.
Mhm.
It gave me chills. Shared it with the team in person, and it just did it again. And have you ever been referred to as a garden variety alcoholic?
Yeah, Bozo on the bus. Yeah, I mean that's
Right? Yeah,
that.
for high achievers and people that maybe have or had some ego, right? Like I'm the best, blah blah blah. When it was weird that that term, I feel like it's something I come back to a lot.
Hmm.
I'm just a garden variety alcoholic, man. That's it. And I get tremendous relief from that. And I think it's kind of like the same thing is I'm just a human
Mm,
Yeah.
living this human experience, which
Yes.
is going to go like
yeah.
this, right? Like the hero's journey. We're all going to get our asses kicked in some way, shape, or form. What do we do with it? And Jeff, I never thought like that there would be relief that came from that. But there seems like there's greater and greater relief with I just got to show up, man.
That's
That's
it.
it.
That's it.
And the rest will be taken care of not by me,
That's it.
right?
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one. And it's kind of that idea too of like there's a lot of relief in just being a person. And that's more than enough.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of relief in that freedom of, and it really like it describes it freedom from bondage of self. Some idea that I am separate and need to do certain things as a self versus I am one of many, like I'm a part of
Yeah.
this whole thing. And I would even say, just to throw this in there, I've been like doing a lot more reading around kind of like Native American ideologies, thought process, things like that. They really bring it back to like the issue with us as a species is we've completely separated ourselves from the environment we live on.
Mm-hmm.
We use the planet to facilitate resources and we use it, but we're not a part of it anymore. And I think that piece too, like just reaches into the human aspect of it, obviously, but on a deeper level, I think that's part of it too, right? Like appreciating this world and realizing that it's miraculous that we're a part of it at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't need some accolades or achievements to justify my existence on it, right? I am here with you now.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, I think so much we've seen this. I know you and I had a chance to talk about just the stigma involved. I've seen it in the military culture as well as just with men in general. Can you tell us some of those stigmas that you were able to kind of realize you're talking about it right now, but what helped you break past that and say, it's okay. I'm a human, you're human. We're here to connect. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, I think it was some intense experiences around that stigma, feeling
Hmm.
that stigmatization. And I'll talk about a couple of them. One was interesting. After I spoke with you guys last week, Ben, your CEO
Hmm.
and co-founder,
Hmm.
came to me and asked me about kind of like the medical field and the culpability of said medical field around kind of the opiate prescription piece and the injury piece and all that. And do I not feel in some way, shape, or form that they are like somewhat responsible?
Responsible, yeah. Hmm.
I am always going to lean to the fact that like I am responsible for my actions and I don't hold people culpable that are outside of myself. But that's just really like far that way because I think I would probably ascribe to a victim mentality if I thought differently. But I will say that it really seems outrageous to me that there are 2 weeks of study devoted to substance use disorder in medical school, and there are 300 people dying of overdose every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, like, that's stigma. That's stigma. And then within the criminal justice system, right? I'll never forget sitting there with the DEA and the FBI. These are narco officers explaining the disease model of addiction to them, and they've never heard it before.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's stigma.
Hmm.
And so I think those moments of realizing how profoundly ingrained in our culture and society those stigmas are really makes me want to champion the cause of trying to diminish them in any way, shape, or form possible,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And you've been doing that. You've been sharing your story. I know you've been doing community service as well. Can you tell us what role community service has played in your recovery? And I know you have a President's Award for community service. So tell us more about that.
It's what we were just describing, right? It's this idea of being one of many and being a part of and being useful and helpful. I'm a guy who needs to learn by doing and experiencing. So it's taken a lot of experience of the scale of I can order a pizza
Hmm.
and watch a movie and sit on my couch, or I can go be useful and helpful and try to be of service to those around me.
Hmm.
Which is going to make me feel better? That's selfish, but it's real. Which is going to make me feel better? What's going to make me feel better is being helpful and useful.
Mhm.
Now, is there a time and place to sit on the couch and eat a pizza and watch a movie? Of course. We have watched the entire chronology of Marvel movies from beginning to end. I'm all about that too. But I just think that to me is really the piece of it that I get back to is like, if I am trying today to grow spiritually,
Mhm.
to become the best version of myself, I want to feel good. What makes me feel good is being useful and helpful. And so then I go do it. And it's everywhere all the time. I mean, one thing I'm going to do, I haven't done it yet, it's on my list. I really want to volunteer at the Humane Society. I'm a big dog lover. I know I sent you a picture of my wife and our dogs with us. And like, that's another piece I want to get into too. So it's always kind of just moving in that space of how can I be useful and helpful? And it's everywhere. Like if you just go Google, how do I volunteer in Madison, Wisconsin? 1,000 things are going to come up.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. You said you wanted to talk a little bit more about that too. Tell us about your wife, about your dogs, about family. What does life look like right now?
Oh my gosh. What a freaking joy. My wife is my favorite person in the entire world, and she's just the coolest human being I know. And she stood by me through some really incredible circumstances,
Mhm.
but she is just the light of my life. We've been married now almost a year. We've been together for over 6 years. Really probably would have gotten married earlier, but we were waiting to find out whether I had to go to federal prison or not. So we kind of had to put things on hold for a bit. But yeah, we're married. We're on the path to having kids. We have two dogs. We have an 8-year-old pointer lab and a 5-year-old Great Dane,
Mhm.
Lincoln and Byron. Byron is 175 pounds.
Oh my god.
He is a monster, but he's
Oh,
just like his daddy, sweet as can be, gentle spirit. I take them everywhere. I had like a networking picnic on Friday at the park, and I was like, oh, they're coming. And I
yeah.
take them. And we have an 18-year-old cat. Let me not leave her unannounced. Lillian is her name. She is very sassy. She's a part of the unit too. So yeah, my wife's family's all in Napa. We were just down there. She did a work week with a volunteer work week with her dad in Yosemite last week. So
Mhm.
I flew down on Saturday and we celebrated her mom's birthday and then we drove back up on Sunday. But they're all there, great people. She has a sister who's an attorney and a brother who's an electrician. And I have a sister who lives in Virginia and runs a farm and has 6 kids. And my mom is outside Charlotte, North Carolina. And yeah, it's really good, man. I don't take it for granted anymore.
Mm.
I was pretty well convinced I was going to be single for my entire life. After, like, I had my high school sweetheart breakup, and then I was like, oh, I don't want anything to do with any of that. Nor did I feel like I was in any position to be in any type of relationship when I was like really loaded all day, every day. And then I met her, and it was just like, oh, wait, I want to be around you all the time. And I'm so glad that it happened the way it did. I was lucky in the sense that I was 6 months sober again when I sat across from her in a meeting and went, who is that incredibly cute, fit woman with cool sneakers on? It was luck, really, for me, honestly. So I just don't take it for granted.
Mm. I love it. I love the story. I know you're doing a lot of work with Summit Behavioral Health Care. Can you tell us a little bit about Summit and your experiences there?
I mean, I'm not just saying this. I really love the company. It's a really solid organization. There are some large operators, and I think the acute psych and substance use disorder space
Mhm.
that get a bad rap, I think, just because the tendency is that they go in and buy operations and homogenize them and kind of remove all the individual sauce from each place to try to maximize revenue. And Summit is not that way. We have 27 substance use disorder facilities around the country, and I think 13 acute psych. Of those substance use facilities, they have bought multiple, what I would call legacy programs,
Mhm.
places that have been around for 35, 40 years. And they maintain the integrity of those places. They don't come in and change everything. And it's really great. And I'm grateful to say that I've spent time with all the C-level people within the organization, and they're great people,
Mm.
which is super, in my experience, professionally rare. And that's no love lost, but I think it takes a special person to kind of be at a C level in one of those large organizations.
Mhm.
These are people that still have some like real genuine humanity and kindness and care and come from, our SUD division president was a tech at a treatment center when he started.
Mm.
So, he's been there. So yeah, I really love it. And I rep them here up in the Pacific Northwest where we live. I live just north of Portland, Oregon. So I kind of cover Washington, Oregon, Northern California for us. I have the capacity as a national guide to refer to any one of those 27 facilities, which is great. And yeah, I freaking love my team, and I love working for them.
That's awesome. I know you
Yeah.
do peer support as well, yes?
I got my coaching certification like 9 months ago.
Mhm.
I'm kind of moving into a little bit of that, just individually working with people, particularly my kind of like desired group is, and I don't want to ax anybody out, but like other retired athletes
Yeah.
that are really struggling with the transition in life of
Mhm.
separating themselves from this identity that has been, very fruitful and long lasting to some new space that is scary and unforgiving.
Mm.
And so just being there for those guys in that space, really in terms of the peer stuff, I'm really trying to angle in that space. And I love that.
So
It
neat.
really is one of those times where I feel like all my experiences, negative and positive, come together in a means by which I can be helpful and useful.
Mhm.
And like that's the mission of all of it, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm sure you guys, I'm sure, have both had terrible experiences along the way.
Mhm.
Anytime you're able to use those to help someone else,
Mhm.
I know for me, it just changes the tone of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
They go from being completely black to a lighter shade of gray to a little bit lighter shade of gray, a little bit like that's great.
Yeah. That's wonderful. So, what advice would you give to someone who's currently struggling, be it athlete or not?
I just would scream it. Sometimes I have a mental image in my mind that I picture when I work with a new guy or when I'm with somebody who's out there still struggling. I just want to hold them and just breathe into them the essence of what all this experience has wrought for me.
Mhm.
And I can't do that. But what I can say is please ask for help. And then when you ask for help, be willing to take the action that that help affords you because that's everything. And I would just preach to people who are struggling that you are not alone.
Mhm.
We are walking among you every day and we are just like you. And I have experienced that lonely, isolating, dark place that you're experiencing now that you can't live with, you can't live without substances. Your life has fallen apart. You don't know what to do.
Yeah.
If you just put your hand up and ask for help, like it's going to come and then just take the action because I've seen it. I've seen it happen for a lot of people. I've worked in treatment almost over a decade and a half at this point, and so I've seen a lot of tragedy, but I've also seen a lot of triumph. And so it's there. It's not impossible by any sense of the means. That statistic of 23 million people in America needing help for alcoholism, substance use disorder, but there's 24 million people in recovery.
Yeah.
And sometimes we forget that. And I would just shout that out too. Like, it's there. You can have it.
So good. Yeah. All right. Cliff, any other questions?
Yes, but we don't have seven
I
hours. I know
know.
we've got
Yeah.
a big time here, and I'm just grateful that I got some more time with
Mhm.
Jeff, and I really am grateful for this new friendship. And I'm inspired by you, Jeff, and the work that you're doing and the work that you're going to do. I think you are more of a leader than you understand, and that's only going to continue with, especially, I think, that
Yeah.
persona. So many other guys that grew up without the space to be vulnerable, to be human, and they were on this track doing what society tells us we're going to do, and they get banged up. And when we get banged up, we got to have a safe place to go. And I think you're going to be that safe place, and you already
Mhm.
are. But I bet over time that's going to get even more specialized for you. And it's work that I love. A lot of friends with this persona who aren't here with us, you
Yeah.
know? So I'm just really, really excited that we're on the same team, man. So thank you.
100%. 100%. Jeff, your energy is just so beautiful. We had the chance to feel that at the retreat for sure when you came to visit us, but I'm so glad that we could share that with our audience here today. And we always end our podcast with one question, and that is, what does recovery mean to you?
Well, thank you. And let me, before I answer that question, not return the adulation for both of you who are unquestionably light bringers. There's an energy to your presence, both of you, that is profound and impactful. Cliff, I am so excited to build our friendship, and you inspire me the same, man, truthfully. And Dr. Mala, your work is incredible. And I applaud you for doing it and for doing this, what you guys are doing here. It's really, really profound and makes a big impact. And again, if one person hears this
Yeah.
and decides that they want to make a change, the three of us have done more than we can ask.
Mm.
You asked me the question of what recovery means to me.
Mm-hmm.
My identity as a man in recovery is everything to me. Recovery means life. Recovery means wholeness. Recovery means peace, serenity, and the capacity to walk on this earth, live life on life's terms, and be okay inside. And that is a miraculous thing for a guy like me. I promise you, if you lived in my headspace for a few years, not too long ago, it was not a pleasant place.
Yeah.
And now today I can sit here and with you guys and be completely present in the moment and enjoy the experience and not be worried about what happened yesterday or what's going to happen tomorrow. And that's recovery.
Mm-hmm.
That's to me recovery. Alcohol and drugs, putting down the substances, that's the beginning. That's the beginning. The real piece of recovery to me is this ability to live life on life's terms. So that would be my answer.
I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you.